Today we are going to look at how to identify the needs or the pain that the customer goes through, right? So before that, a quick introduction. My name is Vijay Shankar and I'm a salesperson, a sales consultant, and now an entrepreneur. Okay, so we move on to the session. So it's about like need or the pain identification, right? So what is the objective here? So we are looking at like how to enable you or your salespeople to uncover the need or pain of a prospect when you're interacting with them. The way you do it is like you need to employ the right strategies and effective questioning, right? And also play a little on the prospect emotions, right? This is how you're going to uncover or identify the needs or pains of the prospect. So in this session, we are going to cover like understanding what is pain and then figuring out how to uncover this pain and figure out like how to like take it to your advantage and get through closure, right? So let's look at like what is pain or what is need, right? Both are one and the same in this context that we are talking today, right? So it's just like you call a customer's need as a pain that he is going through right now, and all of us have heard no pain, no gain, right? So in the sales context, this becomes no pain, no sale, right? So what happens? Customers have their needs and wants, or customers do have pains, right? When you're talking to them, it's your duty or it's your objective should be to uncover that pain and help them solve it, right? And you need to be able to identify the right needs and be able to link your product or services to that particular need, and then which lets you kind of like win the deal, right? So the idea here is, again, when you are able to understand and identify and emphasize that pain well, things go through smoothly. And also in this process, you need to play around with a little tactic in terms of like playing with the buying emotion. Like end of the day, you are selling to a person, a human being, right? And you need to kind of like manipulate a few things from an emotional point of view. When I say emotion, it is not the, it is more of like his behavioral, his mental map in terms of what he wants to decide, right? So you identify a pain, you emphasize that pain, you make him realize that he has that pain, and you also make him realize that he has to solve that by buying your product, right? So he has to decide, and you're influencing that decision. So that's the process, right? So now let's quickly look at like what are the different categories of pain, right? So pain, like there are different categories. There are different types of pains, especially when it comes to like what you need to look for, right? So the first one is the need or the requirement, right? So he has to have it, right? So this we also call it as the painkiller, right? Your solution towards this will be a painkiller where he has a pain and he needs to get rid of that pain. So you have to provide that solution for him to kill that pain, right? Second is a want, right? It is like good to have, right? So your solution against this want will always be a like a vitamin tablet, right? So he doesn't have a burning need, he doesn't have a thing, but it'll be good if he uses your solution against this particular want, right? It's like a vitamin pill. And there are other types, like generally people go through challenges, right? There are a lot of frustrations, a lot of issues, situations that kind of like leads to any particular need or a challenge. And then there are pressure points, right? That is like an industry has to kind of like cope up with the current trend, right? You can't afford to be using spreadsheets to manage your CRM anymore. You need to have a proper CRM system, for example, right? And there are the other type is like a setback, right? So again, like this is very, very relevant in the current situation. Due to certain like external factors, there are certain setbacks in the business, in the process, in the functions, which lead to certain pain points, like reduce sales. They have to manage with like people. They have to get means the costs keep increasing. They have to manage that. So all these are like certain setbacks that that also relate to a pain, right? And other aspect of it is when you look at it as a business, right? There are different types of pains in a business, right? The first is a financial pain. So it is all related to the money, like right from like the need to increase revenues or the need to reduce the costs, right? All these come under the financial pains. And then there are productivity pains. That is, you like if they have a particular solution in place, like it is not performing to the way they want, it is not efficient, right? So there is a productivity pain there. And then there are process pains, right? So a lot of companies have like defined processes in place, and a lot of these processes are like less efficient. So they keep on improving the processes, and to do that, like they need a lot of services, products, solutions. So these are pains related to processes. The last one is support pains. So again, like support is like any particular function in a business has to get support either internally or even externally for that matter to perform well. And if they don't get that right support, right, in the critical stages, it becomes difficult for them to manage and like be productive. So these are the four business pain types. So the idea is like I just took you through these different pain buckets and pain types. Is that like you need to be aware of like the different types so that like when you are either preparing or when you are in the process of a pain identification, you should uh, concentrate on like these different applicable pain points and narrow down onto like what are the specific types of pain that your prospect or his company might be going through and focus on that, right? So fair enough. Now we have understood like what pain is. Now let us look at how to identify or how to uncover that pain. So here is how. Simple. Ask questions, right? The most effective way of identifying or uncovering pain is asking questions, right? So now let us look at like what are and how actually do you go about these questioning, right? So in when you look at like questioning, there are different types of questioning, right? When I say questioning, again, like many of you might have certain doubts in mind, right? Uh, you have to ask, right? And the way you ask matters the most, right? So what you ask is very, very important. I'm reiterating the same thing in different ways because I want to drive home that point, right? Very, very important to ask the right questions and in the right context. If you prepare a set of questions, if you have a lot of questions built up and like you keep on bombarding the prospect with the questions, doesn't work, right? So you have to be very, very contextual and you have to be precise and you have to prepare yourself well for this type of this exercise of questioning, right? So coming back to the point, questioning, like we have different ways of questioning. That is like the again, the objective of this questioning in reference or in this context is questioning to uncover or identify the pain or the needs of the prospect, right? So the first one is like the assumption or the reference way, right? So here you are actually, okay, let me go through this first. So in this methodology, you can base your questions either on the industry needs or on the similar company needs or on the similar profile needs, right? So when I say industry needs, it is about like you are drawing reference to the current state or the trends of the industry, prospect industry, and you are relating the pain areas accordingly, right? So let's look at an example. With the tough situation in the travel industry isn't today, what are your plans to improve inbound leads? So this is your question where you assumed, right? Based on the current trend in the travel industry, you've assumed that their inbound leads are dwindling, right? So you're questioning them as to what are their plans to improve the inbound leads, right? So the second one is based on similar company needs, right? So this is about like how you bring up an example of a similar company to that of your prospect, right? And throw a pain point faced by the company, by that company rather. So the example here is, so you can tell them like, I've been working with so and so company and they've had a tough time implementing their ERP system as they have a lot of custom modules because your type of company, you can't go with the standard ERP. You have a lot of custom modules. Do you have that same problem? Right. So you are bringing in a reference of like another company who is similar to them and you're throwing a pain at them. Right. The third one is like based on similar profile, right? So you are talking to the CIO of an insurance company, right? For example. So you can always refer that I talk to a lot of CIOs in the insurance industry and information security is a top concern for most of them. Do you feel the same way? Right. So this is again the one methodology where you're assuming and you're referencing certain facts based on the industry, the company, and the person's profile. So this is a methodology where you assume and you refer and then ask your questions which relate to pain areas. Right. So let's look at the second methodology, which is a little more precise and conclusive, right? So this is like based on situational facts, based on research facts, and based on mentioned facts, right? So the earlier one was like based on certain assumptions, and this methodology is based on certain facts, right? So again, like situational facts, it's based on their current resources, the current process, the current results they get from different functions, right? And relate them to where your product or service fits in, right? One example of this, how do you keep track of your financial audit process, right? There's you know for sure that that particular prospect's company has to go through a financial audit process, and you're initiating a question that how do you keep track of your audit process, right? Because your solution might actually fit into a problem that he might be facing in this, right? Another example, what do you do when your inbound leads dwindle, right? When your inbound leads reduce, what do you do, right? So these are all like independent processes or certain areas within a particular function. And you know for a fact that these functions need your solution. And these functions might also have certain implications of ups and downs, right? The second one is based on the researched facts, right? Again, like what we discussed in one of the earlier sessions, like preparation, right? You need to do a lot of research about the company, about their industry trends. So based on those facts that you find during that research, you can point certain questions, right? So one example, your recent article stated that your company is initiating a digital transformation process. What is your top priority, right? So this means like actually you, while doing research on this particular person, you found one of his articles and that mentioned about digital transformation for his company. So you're posing a question on that. So this becomes very, very relevant, and it is like decisive and conclusive, right? So you know for sure that they have a fact there, and there could be a potential pain, and it is easy to get a answer to that pain or a need, right? The second example, I see that your company is hiring a lot of interns of late. How do you plan to onboard them efficiently? Right. So again, like you've done some research, like you've seen a lot of job postings from that company for interns, or it could be like freshers. So this is a question that you pose if you are planning to sell like a LMS software or something like that, right? The third one here is the questions based on narrated facts. That is like either the prospect has told you earlier or he has told someone else in the past about any particular situation or a problem. You're bringing that up now in your call. Like you can just say, like one example is like during the last call you had mentioned about running out of office space. What are your plans to move, right? So you are a realtor and you handle commercial spaces. So you bring up this question. And the other example is I heard you narrating your ordeal with the ticketing system that you currently have, right? Can you tell me more about it? So these are the typical questions which have a conclusive and a decisive outcome, right? So most probably you're likely to get and uncover more pains in this methodology, right? So we just discussed two different methodologies. One is the conclusive one and the assumptive one. So the third is the direct way, right? So which is assuming like, or rather, if you're in a situation where you're not able to assume or you've not researched enough about the company, you've gone in blind into the meeting or in a call, then you can still use certain broad and a generic questioning to uncover any particular need. So ideally, like you're talking about certain products or services, and then when it comes to uncovering needs, you can ask an open-ended question like, what is your biggest challenge at this point of time, right? So these are like blind shots, right? You throw, you pray and spray kind of a thing. You throw certain open questions and you expect something comes out of it and you're able to latch on to a pain point, right? The second is like a close-ended question, right? So again, like this is like you're just assuming at that point of time blindly and throwing a question. How are you using your current marketing outreach system to improve your customer acquisition? Right. So you've not researched, you've not based it on any particular facts, but you're throwing a blind question. You might still get something out of it, right? So, but again, all these close-ended questions should be contextual, right? You can't ask very lame questions here. And third is like a magic one or a hypothetical question, right? So this is again like very tactical, and especially I've used it so many times. Like I learned it in my Oracle days, used it so many times when I've been in a dead end, not able to uncover any pain. I use this question, and many times like it's worked for me, right? So magic wand is like you're putting a hypothetical situation, right? So it goes like this. If you could change one thing about your project management process, what would it be? Right? Or the magic wand reference also could be made directly, but Indian context, it doesn't work very well. So assuming you have a magic wand in your hand, what is the one thing that you would change about your project management process? Right? So this is something that you use these different questions when you don't have a lot of context or when you've not had time to research, right? So let us now look at like, OK, Using these three different methodologies, the direct, the conclusive, and the assumptive methodologies of questioning, you've hit some pain point, right? So he says, for example, yeah, you've arrived at a pain point where he mentions that, yeah, my inbound leads have decreased, right? Or my costs have been increasing, right? You've just got the header of the pain, right? So what do you need to do now? You need to emphasize that pain. You need to get deeper, right? So what I'm going to give you here is a methodology called a Sandler pain funnel, right? Again, this is a proven methodology which has been put out by a person called Sandler, and it's been adopted by a lot of companies across the globe. And this is like a very effective process. I'm just taking the liberty of like sharing it here, though there might be certain copyrights or there's nothing per se, but I'm just taking that liberty. So what does it do, right? Or why do you have to go through this process, the pain funnel process, right? So as I said, like when you have uncovered the broad pain, right, you need to go deeper. And you need to emphasize that pain in the prospect's mind so that like you are leading yourself to the next step, which is like towards closure, right? So what do you do in this first, right? Again, like we are talking about questions, right? We have not completed the questions yet. So emphasizing pain also is using questions. First thing, the moment you say, like, for example, you've discussed about like the inbound leads have reduced, right? That is the pain that has come up during the earlier phase. Now, tell me more about that, right? So always see again, apart from this, you should always let your prospects talk, right? And you should listen, make notes, and then ask references, ask cross questions, right? And ensure that like one, you're very clear in terms of like what he has mentioned, and you also displayed the ability to listen, right? Which is very important in targeting the buyer behavior. Salespeople generally kind of like tend to talk more, right? So that's where this entire questioning also helps you. If you have the tendency of like talking more during a sales call, you should tone it down. And using these kind of questions, the entire questioning process will also help you tone that behavior down. Like you talk less, you ask questions, you listen to what the prospect says, right? You get tons and tons of information than like you giving a lot of information about your product and services, right? So coming back to this, like, so tell me more about that, right? So this gives you a little more detail about like what he must have just told you something on the overview, but now he will tell you the nuances of that particular pain that he is going through. If he is still not very granular there, you can also say, can you be more specific? Can you give me an example, right? And then the next step is, how long has this been a problem, right? And what have you tried to do about it, right? So in this example that we discussed, right, he's talked about like his inbound leads reducing. Tell me more about that. Then he says, okay, we've been using this. There is a marketing team and there is a website campaigns, promotions and all that. Then you go through all those details and you pick up one of those finer details and you can ask like, can you be more specific about automation? Can you give me an example why it happened that way? And then you ask, how long has this been a problem? How long have you been going through this, right? He says like last 6 months. What have you tried to do about it, right? So you are playing with the emotions of that person now. So by way of questioning, and you're indirectly emphasizing that pain in his mind. The more he talks about it, the more he realizes, and the more he realizes that he's not been successful in addressing that pain. it's an advantageous position for you, right? And even if he says like yeah, I tried doing this, how did that work, right? Because understand, since he has talked about that pain point, the pain still exists, right? So you can safely assume that even if he has tried different things to address that pain, he has not been successful. It's still not worked well for him. So ask those questions like, how did that work? So you've tried addressing it, it didn't work. So what happened, right? And then coming to like a implication, right? How much do you think this has cost you, right? This could be one example, but again, like you can ask like, what percentage of your leads have dropped, right? And thereby, like, how many customers have you lost, right? So these kind of questions, and then again, like, if it is relevant and if it is applicable, you can ask it, how do you feel about that, right? So it's like playing with his emotions, and it is like a little tactical. So you have to be very, very careful, especially in the last two, the implications and the payoff questions, right? So the idea here is to have this in a very, very smooth conversation. You need to be practicing this a lot, right? You can't just write down these questions and keep asking them. You need to do a lot of mocks with your team, with your manager, and get this internalized fully and try different ways. These are not the exact set of questions that you need to ask. You can write questions based on your own style, your own uh, comfort levels, and then you practice that and internalize, be very, very comfortable in asking these questions before you ask these to a prospect. Okay, finally, have you given up trying to deal with this problem, right? Because you know he is addressed and it didn't work for him. So have you given up, right? So again, like I'm just giving you what Sandler has prescribed, but you can use this efficiently if you get that style in you, right? I've used it. I've used the entire set of questions, not in all calls, but in many of the calls I've used this complete pain funnel. It's been very, very helpful for me. So the next methodology that I'm trying to present and like recommend is the spin sales technique, right? Spin selling actually is a book published by Neil Rickham way back, like more than it's like 30 years ago, and what it gives is like it is again like a question based approach. It's complete question based approach where you're able to have a very, very meaningful conversation with your prospect by way of questioning that helps you uncover the need, emphasize the need, and make them arrive at a solution, right? Sorry. So this methodology means there are 4 different paradigms here. The first is situation, right? You are questioning them to learn more about their current situation, the current processes, the current functions they have, the current results they get out of these functions or processes. The questions are related to that. And then you progress or transition onto a problem-based questioning, a set of problem-based questions. This is like, again, like you're morphing a particular situation and either by way of assuming or being conclusive or being direct, you are transitioning into a problem-based question. Right? And then you go into an implication-based question, right? So how do you actually see or make him realize that because of this problem, he is losing or he's suffering or he is going through a tough time, right? That is making him realize the implication of that problem. And finally, the need payoff, right? This is where, okay, you've made him realize the pain, emphasized, made him understand what is he losing, and then now in the need payoff, you're directing them towards the solution, which is your product or service. Right? So if you look at it carefully, we have already gone through this, right? All the methodologies that I've earlier explained and all the examples that I've given talks about this, right? There is a situation-based question, and then you turn that or transition into a problem-based question, and then you ask an implication-based question, and then you again ask a question that leads towards your product or a solution. Let us look at an example. So a situation question. Again, like I'm for today's session, I could only think of like the marketing and digital marketing leads related problems. So service providers who are offering like anything related to marketing and lead generation, they can relate to this example very well, right? How much do you spend on outbound marketing, right? So this is more of a situational question. So you know this company gets leads through outbound marketing, and you're asking a question which is situational but is a little specific, right? And how do you convert that into a problem statement or a problem related question? Are you happy with the conversion rates? Right. So a conversion rate typically, like for those who don't understand, is like when you spend a particular amount of money on outbound markets, and those outbound marketing, those result into leads, right? And there is a conversion rate in terms of like the amount of money you spent and the number of leads that you get from that activity. And then, so again, like based on this situation, you've tried to create or you've tried to identify a problem, and you've asked a question: are you happy with the conversion rates? Right. So again, like this, based on certain assumptions, you might have researched or you might have seen certain situations where this prospects company might be having a problem with the inbound leads, right? So this entire questioning, this example is based on like assuming that he has an inbound lead. So this becomes a relevant question. Are you happy with the conversion rates? Obviously, no, right? So he will say, not really. It's not that effective. We are working on improving that, right? And you can ask certain other questions in terms of like, okay, what was it earlier? What is it now? How much has it come down, right? All that. And then an implication towards this would be like, what will be the percentage impact on your overall lead numbers if your conversion rates are just like 40%, right? So this is an implication, right? That is, if he is seeing the incoming leads coming down, obviously, it is like means the marketing conversion rates coming down means his incoming leads are coming down, right? There is an impact, and that's what you're implying here. So the need payoff. Have you ever thought about implementing a marketing automation tool that would increase your conversion rates by over 90%? Right? Again, this is a question, right? And your question is based on the problem that he has, the type of impact that the problem has, and your solution that can solve this problem, right? Do you get this gist? So I'm leaving this with you. You can read more about the spin technology, the spin technique. You can create your own questions based on the context, your product and service. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, you need to practice a lot, because the spin technique itself is not a easy one to adopt or implement. You need to means there are umpteen agencies who do like workshops, like full-time workshops on this. Salespeople go through like a few days of training sessions, workshops and mock sessions. So, but it's not rocket science, right? If you get the right gist of it, you can internalize it very well. So go through this, read through a lot about this. A lot of things available, like when you search on Google. Create your own questions, you do practice, and then you implement. Right. So that's pretty much what I had in mind regarding need identification. So what we talked about was like the research in terms of like uncovering needs and the different types of needs and the different types of needs or pains, and then asking questions, questioning being a very, very efficient way of uncovering a need, and then you being able to identify the right needs by asking the right questions and the different methodologies that we saw, the assumptive way, the conclusive way, and the direct way. And then we also saw how to emphasize the pain, the Sandler's pain funnel, and the spin technique, sorry. And this leads towards closure, right? So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much, guys. And now we are open for questions.